I learned another word today, to tolify. You'll agree with me that it's really very tough to be able to say anything meaningful after we had such a rich evening in which not only we learned about Mama, but we were taken to reflect on ourselves and the place we occupy in our history today. So I'm sorry that I'm coming a bit late. I hope you will be bearing with me in some of the reflections I prepared to share with you. The Sisulu family, the families of the icons of our struggle, George, Masofi, and the Honorable Minister, Deputy Minister of Health, the Honorable Speaker of the National Assembly, Sisbale Kambete, and the Deputy Speaker, Leshesa Tsenoli, Chairperson of the Council of the University of Cape Town, Dr. Sipu Pichana, the Chairperson of the Council of the University of Pretoria, Futim Toba, the Vice Chancellor of Fort Hare University, Professor Sakela Buhlungu, Vice Chancellor of the University of Pretoria, my dear daughter, Charlotte Delaray, the many university executives from across the country present here tonight, the Deputy Chairperson and CEO of the Motsepe Foundation, Dr. Precious Monoi Motsepe, representatives of APSA, Chairperson of the National Heritage Council, I didn't see him, the members of the retired nurses, organization, hello, health leaders from national, provincial, and local government health departments, health entities and academic institutions, and the many health activists from the 80s and today, the leadership of the Albertina Sisulu Executive Leadership Program in Health and the Albertina Sisulu Fellows, all the committed health and development professionals and organizations here today. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. It is a privilege and honor for me to stand before you today to present the centenary lecture commemorating the life of Albertina Sisulu, a unifying force of this nation, a giant of the liberation struggle, and an inspiration to all humanity. As we commemorate 100 years of her life, we reflect on how this incredible human being, gifted to us from a village deep in the Transkei, blossomed into one of South Africa's finest daughters. I will start by calling Mama herself. Nziki has done this, but I had also prepared to bring the voice of Mama to speak to us in her own speaking. I quote, "We are each required to walk our own road and then stop, assess what we have learned, and share it with others. It is only in this way that the new generation can learn from those who have walked before them. We can do no more than tell our story. It is then up to them to make of it what they will." And hers is a remarkable story, that of political prisoner, a struggle stalwart, a nurse, a partner, a matriarch, a daughter. These are just a few titles that Masisulu, the rock of her family and this nation, wears with distinction. I chose to speak about Mama today as the rock. As a young member of her generation, I consider myself immensely fortunate to have studied and learned from her. Her life taught me what it takes to be a servant of the people and a true cadre of a liberation movement. In 1992, at my invitation, she came to Mozambique to help me brainstorm around the place and role of civil society in a multi-party system. She was then a co-chair of UDF. I will always remember her keen intellect and her rich contributions to our planning sessions. Beyond a source of wisdom, to me, she was and she is a mother figure. Both Mama and Walter opened their arms and warmly welcomed me into their family. Walter was a close mentor to Madiba, as we all know, and I therefore found myself enveloped by their role. They became tender parental figures to me here in South Africa. And you'll be happy to know that while Arch Tutu was shouting and saying, Madiba and I should get married, Mama, exactly like herself, she would simply whisper, when are you getting married? And no one would have known if I didn't tell you that she was really the biggest encouragement for me to convince myself that yes, I have to get married. But on a broader note, what do we make of Albertina Sisulu's legacy at this time when the legacies are being contested? Why do we feel so strongly that new generations need to know about this extraordinary human being? We do so because the noble values Masisulu embodied and the courageous way in which she led her life can serve and must serve as a beacon to us as we navigate the complexities of our personal and public spaces. There have been several lectures honoring Albertina Sisulu in the past few months, but this lecture is particularly special because it has been organized by the Albertina Sisulu Executive Leadership Program in Health in partnership with the Sisulu family. As we have heard from previous speakers today, the ASELF project was founded in 2012 and launched by the Minister of Health, Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi, in May 2013. It is a groundbreaking international collaboration between South Africa's National Department of Health, the University of Pretoria, the University of Fort Hare, the Harvard Chan School of Public Health in the United States, and South African partners. Consistent with Albertina Sisulu's legacy, ASLEF promotes healthcare leaders who are ready to act and who demonstrate their concern for those who are most in need of an effective, responsive, and ethical healthcare system. Thank you to all the ASLEF partners for envisioning this centenary lecture in Masisulu's honor and working so hard to make it a reality. From my discussions with the Sisulu family, I know that SF Project has a special place in their hearts. Members of the family, especially grandchildren, Duma and Tumi, have been actively involved in the project since its inception, and I commend them on their involvement with this important initiative. I'm also told that SL Fellows come from among a diverse competitive national pool of applicants recommended by the Provincial Department of Health. SL provides them with high-quality strategic leadership training with the goal of improving crucial component of the healthcare system, which is to increase capacity to deliver high-quality healthcare services and to strengthen and elevate executive-level performance of the future generations of health leaders. Since its inception, more than 300 healthcare managers have enrolled in an SF program at the University of Pretoria or the University of Pretoria. The family sees SF as a premier legacy project and feels affirmed by the fact that there are 300 health managers out there who can proudly say, and I quote, "We are Albertina Sisulu Fellows," unquote. What a profound and meaningful way to perpetuate the legacy of our mother. But what is the real value and meaning of celebrating legacies? The contributions to humanity of our icons provide outstanding examples of how we can confront extraordinary challenges. We take inspiration from the values they embody and learn from them how to practically overcome the difficulties of our time. Celebrating is not only to talk of the past, it's more important to say, how does it apply to the challenge of our own specific time? How do we transform the strengths and the examples we take from them to make them, as we have the 300 leaders, to multiply into Albertinas, hundreds of Albertinas, thousands of Albertinas? Because we should also remember one thing. Albertina was born in a normal, rural family, like anyone. So you are not born and grow simply to say you are going to be a hero. It depends on the choices you are going to make in life. It depends on how you position yourself as a social being, which means I'm a rural girl. There are many rural girls sitting in this room. Any one of us has also something which you can give, and it can transform you into a servant of the people. So celebrating, it's actually looking inside ourselves and say, how much I can transform of myself, even of my condition of birth, to serve, and then others will call you also a leader. Albertina Sisulu was, by nature, a nurturer. As a young age, she was charged with the duty of taking care of ailing parents and the 3 younger siblings. True to her empathetic instincts and the experience as a caretaker in her formative years, she chose the noble profession of nursing as a career. And in 1940, she left the familiar surroundings of her small town living in the Transkei and was immediately confronted with the harsh political realities that came with the big city of Johannesburg. How many, until today, young women from those areas who come to Johannesburg? still exactly in the same circumstances. Before delving into her political activism, I would like to take a moment here to place a spotlight on her nursing career and the creative ways in which she accelerated social change through her daily work. Sisulu was courageous and resilient, and she used work as a nurse to keep her feet on the ground in a literally sense. When she worked at the Shanti Clinic in Soweto, she would walk to work, back, and on the way people would talk to her, and in this way she would be kept updated on what was going on in the community. When she was banned from attending meetings and confined to the magisterial district of Soweto, she was not allowed to be in a room of more than 2 people except in her professional capacity, and she was not allowed to communicate with other banned people, which included virtually all her political comrades. Her work as a nurse was therefore a lifeline to her, because without it, she would have been cut off from the community. It also enabled her to conduct underground ANC activities. Activists such as the trade union's John Kadimeng would masquerade as patients who would visit the clinic to consult with Sisulu. Important political information would be exchanged during those consultations. She was confronted with the realities of racial discrimination on a daily basis. In her words, I quote, "Even after I worked my way up to a senior nurse, a junior ward nurse would be called to take charge of the ward in which I worked. This was deeply offensive to someone who took a great pride in her professional ability," unquote. When her mother passed away in 1941, the white matron refused to allow her time off to go to the funeral, an act of cruelty that she could never forget and would often refer to it later in her life. Ever a fighter, she found ways to fight against apartheid system, and she was a bridge builder in this effort. Sisulu worked as a council nurse until her retirement in 1984. She was then invited by Dr. Abu Asfat to work in his surgery in Rockville. In him, she found a kindred spirit. Like Albertina, Abu Asfat had a deep hatred of injustice and oppression and was dedicated to taking medical services to the poor. People were surprised at Dr. Asfat, who was at the time the health secretary of AZAPO, and Sisulu, the co-president of UDF, working together. They forged a strong relationship and served the community tirelessly, even opening up a feeding scheme and creche for the local children. She saw beyond partisan politics. This is one lesson of her life that we need to take a close note of, because she knew the value of working across ideological lines to benefit the greater cause of service and achieve equality, freedom for her people. We would be well advised to take heed of Sisulu and Asfat's examples here. Nowadays, in our political discourse, it is rare to find people who will bridge party divides. Those in political domain largely focus on their differences than than how they can work together for the betterment of their communities. Whenever the well-being and welfare of our community is at stake, and when there is a good cause to be fought for, we should not be divided by political affiliations. Differing colors of political parties should not prevent people from uniting and working together for the common good. Albertina loved Dr. Asfad like a son and worked for him until he was brutally assassinated in his surgery, right in front of her very eyes in January 1989. She was heartbroken and distraught by this tragic loss, and the occasion of his funeral was one of the only times in her life that this lady of fortitude wept openly in public. I'm glad that the nursing fraternity is so well represented here this evening, including the retired nurses, many of whom have stories to tell about Masisulu. Their profession is a noble one, a compassionate calling of service that provides comfort to the vulnerable and sick. We must remember, all of us, when we are in the hands of a nurse, we are in a deep need. We are emotionally vulnerable. And it is exactly the time you need, more than professional skills, you needed the humane touch, which nurses give to us. As I have mentioned, her nursing career is a journey that has not been adequately memorialized, and I hope that this will be analyzed further as part of the celebration of her rich legacy. I mentioned that Masisulu's political consciousness was ignited by the discrimination she and other black nurses encountered in her training hospital. But her political leanings were further sharpened a year later when she met and fell in love with Walter, a young political activist central to the leadership of the African National Congress. Masisulu was a trailblazer and an equal to her partner, Walter. Legend has it is that Walter and Masisulu enjoyed an unusual dating dynamic consisting mainly of attending political meetings, including the inaugural meeting of the ANC Youth League in April 1944, at which she was the only woman present. This was only the beginning of a political first in her life, and their courtship eventually evolved into marriage in July 1944. Her choice in husband would shape the trajectory of her life. We can take lessons from her decision. She chose wisely, as in her marriage to Walter, she had found a man who was committed to the equality of women and put into practice his beliefs by sharing responsibility even for the housework and child care. Given his devotion to political freedom, his undertaking was one that did not bring home a regular salary. Without arrogance or insecurity, Masisulu became the breadwinner of the family. With pride, she supported him and their 5 children with her earnings as a nurse and midwife. How many of young women who, when for any reason they have to support the family, they become so arrogant? They don't humble themselves to build a relationship or partnership with the man they chose to marry. And we remember we are talking of the 1940s. So this couple is an example of what we should look at and say, what does it mean to choose a partner? How do you combine your emotional connection, but also with really partnering in all aspects of your life, including setting examples like those ones, those years were not very fashionable. But they are something we should learn from. They were really a power couple before it was fashionable to be so. Their reversal in traditional roles gave full expression to the versatility of Masisulu's womanhood and serves as a model of what it means to fully value and respect the dignity of a woman as an equal partner in a marriage. She was the rock of her marriage and her family, aligned with Walter's political beliefs and sharing his spirit of defiance against the apartheid regime. She stood shoulder to shoulder with him in their both activism. They supported each other emotionally, financially, and politically. Why this is so important is because sometimes we find people who are shoulder to shoulder professionally, but they don't share shoulder to shoulder also at home. And these are lessons of the rock I want to bring to our reflection today. And I will mention this when I talk more importantly about family. You know, it is important for us to talk about the big issues which in public life people are. But the real character of people is what happens in those small daily relationships, which are the ones which humanize relationships and make relationships meaningful. In the 1950s, Masisulu emerged as a leader in the struggle in her own right when she took on influential roles within the ANC Women's League and the Federation of South African Women, which led to campaign against the Bantu education in 1954 and the Pass Law uprising of the 50s. She was one of the main organizers of the historic August 1956 protest march, where 20,000 women marched to the Union building against the infamous Pass Laws. In 1963, due to her leadership and unrelenting activism, Albertina Sisulu became the first woman to be detained under the notorious 90-day detention law. How many of us do we know this? I want to repeat. She became the first woman to be detained under the notorious 90-day detention law. For decades, she was intimately involved in the clandestine ANC operations. She provided safe harbor to operatives, and she was a vocal and visible symbol of resistance. From her moral fortitude and unrelenting insistence on equality, both racial and gender, she was continually harassed by police and endured detention, imprisonment, solitary confinement, torture, and banning orders. She was banned for a total of 18 years, longer than any other activist in the history of the movement. But we don't know. We don't tell these stories, and we need to tell them again and again. And you know why? I'm going to mention this. It was that very quiet dignity and that very quiet leadership she provided, that she was not looking for, you know what I mean? Okay. So, due to her fortitude and her strength of character and integrity, as well as ability to work with others, in August 1983, while she was imprisoned, she was elected co-president of the United Democratic Front, a powerful multitude of civic organizations. That has been mentioned. The Deputy Minister of Health spoke very eloquently of how difficult it was to bring all this multitude of civic organizations under one roof, and it took the leadership of Mama to be one of the unifying forces. And given her unique and varied experiences, her open-mindedness and inclusive leadership style, she brought legitimacy and credibility to the UDF as a diverse umbrella of organizations. I'm pleased to see highlighted in the Sisulu family archives that in 1989, she led a high-level delegation of UDF leaders on a tour to Europe and the United States. The delegation met the British Prime Minister at that time, Margaret Thatcher, and the President Bush of the US, as well, one of our friends, the Swedish Prime Minister, Ingvar Carlsson. This visit marked a shift in policy by the major Western powers because it was the first time that an anti-apartheid organization had been received at the White House and the 10 Downing Street. This delegation took the struggle from South Africa to the heart of the governments of the US and UK, who were the strongest opponents of the anti-apartheid movement. We had our comrades who were in exile, who did a lot of work with the OAU, a lot of work with the UN, but of course, because of who they were, they have never been received at the heart of these two. And Masisulu was the first with her delegation exactly to be at the heart of those who opposed vehemently, the struggle for our liberation. An American anti-apartheid campaigner, Mary Tissot, recalled that Albertina made a powerful impression on the people she interacted with during this trip. And I quote, "She was the epitome of decency and respectability. In her quiet, underestimated way, she completely debunked the image put out by the apartheid government's propaganda. This was very important because it was the first time so much publicity was given to someone from democratic movement within South Africa," unquote. Masisulu was a leader and an influencer of note. She is an exemplar that female leadership and perspectives are crucial at the highest levels in our political, in our private and public as citizens, in the citizen sectors. Their presence contributes to a leadership culture that is sensitive and humane. We would be well served to take lessons on the importance of having faces and voices of African women amplified and multiplied in our boardrooms and in our decision-making chambers, but bringing always the feminine perspective in those boardrooms and decision-making bodies. Masisulu brought a uniquely feminist and feminine touch to her activism. In 1992 interview, she explains what fueled her rage against the evils of apartheid regime. I quote, "No black mother who witnessed the madness of people shooting children in the 1976 Soweto school uprising has been unaffected by this. It has radicalized black women in a manner that perhaps no other event has ever done. It has drawn women into the struggle at every level in order to demand that this kind of slaughter of our children end. As mothers, we were compelled to demand, I quote, "Kill us if you must, but in God's name, leave our children alone." Her contribution to the struggle and leadership style are exceptional. Yet she represents the millions of women who were present and central to the movement that history has failed to individualize and whose singular stories remain untold. I think it is part of this celebration which has to encourage many of us to dig into the stories of many, many women in this country who made a huge contribution. They are still alive, actually, and we haven't written about them, so the generation will learn. And yes, you are right, my daughter. Why is it that if we have two, a male and a female heroes who are celebrating 100 years, the whole year it's Mandela? Only in October we seem to have woken up and say, oh, let's celebrate Sisulu. It is an indictment against us as well, us as women as well, not to be able to celebrate our own and to bring these stories. Yes. And I started my contribution saying Sisulu is a rock. Yes, she has been many times depicted as a symbol of courage, fortitude, and calm endurance. Journalist Alistair Sparks described her consistency, and I think this is important, consistency of leadership, and saying she was absolutely dependable. For many people, she provided a rock of stability when the liberation movement was foundering in stormy weather, unquote. It has been well recorded that, I quote again, she was admired for her quiet, unassuming manner, her integrity, and the fact that she never sought media attention or public accolade, unquote. Even after freedom was won, she continued dutifully serving this country, first in Parliament and thereafter within the Albertina Sisulu Foundation, assisting children with special needs in Soweto. Sisulu is indeed a rock and was a pillar of defiance, of fortitude, and of simultaneous fidelity to her nation and her family. It is with good reason that we affectionately call her Ma Sisulu. It really makes sense. It's Ma Sisulu to all of us. For in addition to being a leader and a mighty symbol of strength to her community and to her nation, she was a loving caregiver and fearless guardian to her immediate family as well. In the midst of her nursing career and political activism, Sisulu was a busy mother. She managed to bear and raise 5 children of her own, in addition to young family members she took in as well. All had the values of, all of them, I want to insist on this, all had the values of equality, of freedom, and justice instilled in them from a young age. She molded them to understand the importance of their own activism against apartheid. And amid incredibly challenging circumstances, in a nurturing spirit of love and defiance, she groomed her children with a sense of purpose. They were all the target of the security police, and each of them having to suffer the brutalities of detention, of arrest, torture, and heartbreak of exile. Many wouldn't know that Max was the first youngest prisoner at the age of 17 to be arrested. And 17, it is an adolescent, actually. It's not even a young man. But that's the kind of a mother who, we remember, Tata was in prison. And she was the one holding the family together and making the family really become united. In 2001, she recounted her testimony, and I quote, she said, "I could cope with the constant police raids, with my banning orders and the prison. I could even cope with my husband being in prison. But when the regime went for my children, the pain was unbearable." Masisulu was an anchor to her family. She built a solid, cohesive family in which her daughters-in-laws were also embraced as her own. A family based on values of dignity, love, and mutual support. A family designed for service to public good. All her children are dedicated public servants with impeccable credentials. They honor their parents by example and are model citizens. There is a vein of public service which runs through this family, which is unique. And as the guiding matriarch, Masisulu is the rock of this commendable lineage. When Walter was in prison, Masisulu was like a single working mother. No different from the millions of single mothers across the country, this country today, tasked with both raising children and putting food on the table. South Africa is still a fatherless nation. I want to talk about this very importantly, because sometimes we are taken to think that the biggest contribution you can give is in public life. But a society which is to be cohesive, a society which builds young people, children and young people in principle of purpose, in principles of service to community, of solidarity, it begins at home. It is the family which builds this. And I want us to look at Mama as perhaps amongst all the other contributions she can give to us as a reference is this ability of alone with Papa in prison. Alone, how many years you remember? 25 years alone. She built her family, she kept her family cohesive and united. And I think the lessons are important for today because of what I'm going to say now. South Africa is still a fatherless nation, in which recent statistics reveal that 50% of South African fathers to children aged 15 years or younger are absent from their lives. This translates into millions of mothers and grandmothers assuming the parenting role for their children and grandchildren. And that signaling the continued deterioration of the fabric of the family unit. We are told that over 60% of South African homes are fatherless. So South Africa is plagued by an ongoing wave of fatherlessness. Only 33% of South African children live with both of their parents. And for those in single-parent homes, 39% live with their mothers, while only 4% live with their fathers. Why this is important? Trends of this magnitude are bound to rip and claw at the fabric of a nation that is already suffering from one of the highest single motherhood rates in the world. Does the aggression fomenting in fatherless homes have any correlation to the more than 2.1 million crimes committed in South Africa in 2017? It's a question. What we know is that fatherlessness serves as the start to a snowball effect that results in a generation of young adults who are social misfits. Research has found that boys growing up in absent father households are more likely, are more likely to display hypermasculine behavior, including different forms of aggression, getting involved in unhealthy relationships, crime, and addiction. We should wonder why the levels of aggression and violence in our schools. How many of those children are coming from families whose parents or mothers are also coming from a fatherless family? So, whereas girls with absent fathers are likely to grow up with low self-esteem, leading to increasing possibilities of high-risk sexual behavior, teenage pregnancy, or unhealthy relationships with the opposite sex. I'm bringing this to say it is not an issue of the past only to have families without a father. Actually, in our days, it has become worse. And that's why the example of Mama is relevant to take it to all of us to say, yes, you might be in a challenging situation, but you still can be a rock to your family. So, my message to young single mothers is to take inspiration from our Sisulu parenting style. To say it is possible, it can be done. And to young women, she is a proof that there is no contradiction between fulfilling traditional responsibilities as caregivers and nurturers and modern roles of career women and breadwinner. It's another issue. Our young people struggle between being a professional and being a family person. And Mama is telling, as I mentioned to you, she was a mother and she never failed her duties as a mother. She was a professional, and as we know, she was an epitome of professionalism. She was an activist, political activist, and also it's what we heard tonight. The example is you don't need to negotiate between this. You just have to balance the two. Because nature tells you that it's in the rock of your family where you are going to be grounded and rooted. But yes, it is true that you have to be a professional of competence and excellence. Don't negotiate. Don't feel like it's either or. It's both. And you do it with excellence. And that's the example which Mama is doing. So, I want to finish saying her life is a testament to the fact that if we want to undo the limitations of race, class, and gender that still mark our violent history and landscape today, it must become the norm that girls and boys be equally valued and nurtured as full human beings, receive the best education possible, and are equipped to achieve their greatest personal and professional aspirations. Masisulu and Walter also demonstrated how important love, humility, and mutual respect in a relationship is, and it becomes power that brings equity in a union. They proved how both beneficial it is for a woman to be valued as an equal in a romantic partnership. He is a model of how a woman can both make a contribution both outside of the home and equally provide a solid foundation for the home. She is an example of how one does not have to sacrifice, I mentioned this, career for family or vice versa, and that is possible to balance to the levels she feels comfortable on her own terms, both at home and at the workplace. Masisulu reinvented herself as her circumstances required, and stretched herself beyond the traditional perceived limitations of gender, class, and race to chart a course from village girl to national and international icon. So here, our rock. She remained steadfast in her purpose, in her truth, loyal to her values, loyal to her family, loyal to the nobility of her profession, loyal to her country, and loyal to freedoms of humanity. Yes, this is the rock of our nation, and may we all take inspiration and also be unmoved. Thank you.